As a parent, you quickly learn that giving a child what they want versus what they need is often a recipe for disaster. And yet you don't learn. You make that mistake over and over and over again. Because a few months ago, I didn't even know how I came to this decision, but I hosted a birthday sleepover for one of my children, and I promised I would not say which. And everything was going okay. Pizza and games, a movie. And I had promised them this long-anticipated Sunday bar. And I just forgot what time it was, and all of a sudden it hit 9 p.m. And I thought, okay, it's fine, it's 9 o'clock, it's early. And so I text the parents of the kids who were invited, and I let them know that the sugar extravaganza was about to begin. And each one responded with variations of, it's your house, good luck. And in hindsight, I should have taken those texts more seriously, because by 10:30 p.m., when I declared it was time to get into our sleeping bags, oh, they were sugared up and they were unfiltered and they were jumping off couches, running through the halls, and they ignored every single word I said. And they got exactly what they wanted. And I received memories that reflect nightmares. And a version of myself that no one should ever see after midnight. And that night reminded me, see, there's Torah everywhere, by the way, but that night reminded me that there's always space for want. But those who are responsible must first ask the question, what's really needed? It's a realm for every area of life. Parenting, partnership, leadership, community, giving people what they want, sure, that wins a temporary approval. But giving people what they need, that takes patience and courage and wisdom and confidence. That's what sustains growth. And it's the very question that's asked in Pinchas this morning. Because we see Moses at a turning point, and we've been studying Moses' character the past few weeks. We don't see Moses striking a rock. We don't see Moses shouting in frustration. But we see this calm Moses who approaches God in order to appoint his successor. And this is what he says. Let the eternal God of all spirits appoint someone over this community so that the people will not be like sheep without a shepherd. And Rashi explains that Moses uses the phrase Elohei Haruchot. You heard it in the beautiful Ark prayer that Rabbi Kornsgold gave earlier this morning, that Moses uses this term Elohei Haruchot intentionally. Just as God knows the unique spirit of every single person, Moses is determining that now the people need a successor, someone who can see the individual within the crowd. Now, it's not the same Moses, remember? This isn't the Moses that lost his temper with the golden calf. It's not the Moses who's overwhelmed by complaints in the wilderness. But this is now a Moses who can decipher between want and need. He understands the people need something different. They no longer need him. They don't need a liberator, but they need a shepherd. Someone who can guide gently. And someone who can see souls, not masses. And so Joshua is chosen, not because he's the strongest or the loudest, but because he is the kind of person who can meet people where they're at. Moses was no longer a shepherd that saw each individual sheep within the flock, but Moses knew they needed Joshua, a shepherd who had the capability of analyzing the needs of each sheep, of each person, in order to move the flock exactly where it was meant to go. But let me remind you why a shepherd is so special. Maybe you remember the story from the Baal Shem Tov. It was Yom Kippur. It was the holiest day of the year, and the synagogue was packed with serious, solemn prayer. But in the back of the shul, in the back of the synagogue, stood a young shepherd boy. And he thought to himself, all I've ever wanted to do is speak a word of Hebrew. All I've ever wanted to do is be able to join in prayer. But all he knew was how to care for his sheep. And in his heart, he longed to join in. And we all know what it feels to be left out. And so this was his prayer. God, I don't know how to pray. All I know how to do is whistle. I whistle to calm my sheep, to guide them. It's how I connect to each and every one of them. And maybe my whistle in this moment, maybe my whistle can connect to you. So he began to whistle. And the congregation wasn't exactly like ours. Listen, we talk, we schmooze, it's loud during prayer. But that congregation was silent. And so when they heard that whistle, they gasped. A whistle in the synagogue on Yom Kippur. But the Baal Shem Tov lifted his hand and said, leave him alone. Because his whistle, that rose higher than all of our prayers. It came from the heart. When the gates of heaven were closing, it was the shepherd's whistle that broke them apart. So what makes a shepherd special? It's not always the grand vision. It's not always the greatest speech. It's not always yelling at people in order to get them to do what you want, because that's what Moses remembered about himself, what he didn't like about himself. What's special about a shepherd is having a deep connection, not just knowing what people should do, but understanding who they are. It's not performance. It's presence. It's what the philosopher Martin Buber teaches. He writes that there are two ways to relate to others: the I-it relationship and the I-thou. What's an I-it relationship? It's when we see each other as objects, as useful, interesting, sometimes even beloved, but at a distance. We interact with each other based on what they are to us. It's a world that we're used to today. We scroll and we swipe, we manage and we post. We see people often as a means to an end, as roles, as tools, and we ask, what can I get from this person? How can this person help me achieve what I want? But the I-thou relationship is entirely different. It's not about function. It's about encounter. It's about standing before another soul and saying, Hineni, here I am. It's not about seeing someone as a label. It's not seeing them as a resume, not seeing them as a mistake, or even seeing them as a favor. It's seeing them as a person. And in those holy encounters, says Buber, that's when we find God. That's when we find the Holy One. It's one of the reasons why I became a rabbi, yes, to service the entire congregation, but also to serve each and every person as they are in the moment that I see them. In rabbinical school, we had a class with our theology professor, Rabbi Neil Gilman, may his memory be for a blessing, and he would ask each and every one of us to choose a metaphor, the way we see ourselves as a rabbi. And I remember choosing this idea of shepherd, because what does a shepherd do? They guide, they teach, they see, they connect, and they choose to move together. It's finally the transformation that Moses undergoes at the end of his life. This is what the shepherd boy in the story instinctively understood. And the questions that I want to leave you with on this Shabbat morning is not, what do they want? But rather, what do they need? What does my child need from me? Not to entertain, okay, sometimes to entertain, but really to guide. What does my partner or my friend need? Not to always be agreed with, although sometimes that's nice, but to be truly seen. What does my community need? Not just to be inspired, although I hope that happens, but ultimately to be known. Moses, at the height of his tenure, asked that question and became even greater by stepping aside. The shepherd boy, he asked it with a whistle and pierced the heavens. And Buber reminds us every encounter we take is a choice to either reduce someone to a task or lift them up into a relationship. It's a calling we have this morning to choose presence over performance, humility over certainty, and heart over noise. And we can be the kind of leaders and parents and friends and partners who seek not what is wanted, but what is needed. And my prayer for all of us this morning, may we choose to be like Joshua, like the shepherd, and like Moses in his final act, to meet each soul with open eyes, with soft hearts, and the courage to be like God, Elohei Haruchot, connecting spirit to spirit, soul to soul. Shabbat Shalom.